Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gatwiri Muthara, Membership and Communications Manager with COMTO National. We're going to give it a few seconds to allow some of our attendees to come into the Zoom, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you for joining us. And we're expecting, we had about 150 RSVPs, so we're hoping for a full house this afternoon. All right, we have about 50 people joining us so far. I'm going to go ahead and proceed and get the webinar started. Once again, this is Gatwiri Muthara, Membership and Communications Manager with COMTO National. I'd like to welcome you to our Emerging Leaders webinar. Today we will be presenting A Seat at the Table, Developing Opportunities for Minority Young Professionals in an Evolving Transportation Landscape. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our industry partners for their support of COMTO throughout the year. They are ACOM, HNTB, Jacobs, and WSP. I'd like to review a few webinar housekeeping items. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please send a chat message to the host. To submit questions for the Q&A portion of the call, please use the Q&A box. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. This call is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees. And once again, thank you for joining us. Now I'd like to introduce to you our moderator for today's session, Mr. John Ross Alexander, also known as JR. He's a Senior Transportation Planner with Sound Transit. JR, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Gatwiri. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I hope everybody's doing really, really well. And welcome to our webinar, See at the Table. So without further ado, I want to introduce our fellow panelists. So next slide, please. All right, so we have with us some really, really cool individuals who are rising stars in the transportation industry, right? So we have Melanie Ariola, who represents the Stanislaus Council of Governments out in Central California. Then we have Dante Flood, who represents COMTO National. And we have Kiana McCoy, who is with HNTB. These are some of our brightest rising stars in the transportation industry. And I really wanted to have a really good conversation with them to kind of see what does the seat at the table mean to them. And just to kind of like give you a heads up, this webinar is brought to you by the Tier 1 level of the Emerging Leaders Committee. And you may be asking, well, what is the Emerging Leaders Committee, right? What do y'all do? And so pretty much we're a subcommittee of the membership committee, and we work on key initiatives to engage COMTO members seeking to build the skills necessary to achieve their highest career goals, whether it be an executive officer or running a national public or private transportation agency, company, not-for-profit, nonprofit, any type of career path that they may take. Pretty much, we provide the tools for members to achieve their career goals. So I, along with Whitney Morgan, are the Tier 1 program managers. At Tier 1, so we have 4 tiers. So we have the entry level or the young professionals. Then we have Tier 2, which is middle management. Tier 3 is senior management. And Tier 4 is our C-suite. So those are our executives, our entrepreneurs, those who own their own companies. And so we're just going to drop right into this. So I'm going to kick this over to Melanie for our first question. What does a seat at the table mean to you? Like when you hear that phrase, like what kind of like what type of thoughts are in your head?
Thanks, JR. So I'll kick it off. And for a seat at a table for me just means like being included in that conversation, and just be given that opportunity to provide my personal perspective, provide a different lens. But I also think that it's equally important to be able to listen to others that are in the table. So I think it goes both ways. There's always something to learn from each other.
Indeed, indeed. And fellow panelists, anybody want to follow up on that? Oh,
good afternoon. I'll jump in. Just for me to first echo Melanie's comments on having your voice heard in the important rooms, I think is what a seat at the table most means to me, but not only having your voice heard, but having your opinions validated. I think that's an important key to that. And also finding opportunities to bring someone else with you to that table is another, I think, main thing that we need to look at when talking about a seat at the table. So not only bringing your seat, but bringing the seat for someone else.
Like being able to like lift as you climb is very, very, very important, right? We'll get into that a little bit later in our conversation, but being able to not only have that seat, but to provide seats for everybody else who's like, on the come up as you are, it's super, super key. What about you, Dante? Like, how you feeling, man? Like, what does seat at the table look like to you?
JR, I second Melanie and Kiana. When I hear having a seat at the table, it means you're given the opportunity to not only give your input, but also make a difference in your community, because everyone at the table comes from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different demographics. So you have to take that into consideration as you're trying to build communities through the transportation industry. So I second both of what they say. But a seat at the table means giving the opportunity to provide your input and make a difference back at home.
Exactly. Community is everything. This is why we get into this. Like, we want to make sure that we're bettering our communities by the work that we do, right? It's not always about the money, it's about the impact that you want to leave, right? And that's super, super, super key. And speaking of different backgrounds, different interests, like this is why you all were selected. You guys are all in different regions, different areas. So, but that also talks about different things that you may be working on. So Dante, so I'm gonna kick it off to you. So what are you currently working on with COMTO? Like, what are some of the things that you're currently doing in your career as an emerging leader?
Tell you one thing, man, COMTO National definitely keeps me busy.
Is it easier to ask what are you not doing?
Well, one of the things that I've been working on, for example, closely with Victoria, is helping her with the webinars. Usually, I'm on the back end of these webinars, making sure everything's good on the admin side. So by the sheer fact that I'm here in front of you all today and our COMTO members, it's a privilege. But a lot of the things that I'm working on with National, we're getting ready for a virtual conference. We also have other committees that we're tending to. We have so much going on with this organization, and with COVID that just took place and everything, and with how this organization is progressing, I just think it's phenomenal that we're able to continuously move through this, through this patch that we're going through right now. I think it's very important to keep all of our members engaged through webinars and events such as this, to let them know, hey, COMTO, we're still kicking. We have a lot planned. Yeah, COVID happened, but we're not going to let that stop us. So, a lot of plans going on with COMTO National, make sure you register for the conference. But, we have a lot going on, and I'm very excited to what not only the conference has to hold, but what 2022 has to show for. So.
Kiana, so what are some cool things that you work on at HNTV? Like, I know you're a diversity specialist, correct? So
Yes.
What does that look like for you?
So my main project here at HNTV is with the Major Mobility Investment Program. It's one of the largest infrastructure projects in the Southeast. Right now we have 17 projects that are 17 infrastructure projects that will change transportation and how we move around Georgia. So as part of the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise team here, we make sure that we are getting the information out to small businesses about the opportunities that are coming. And then with the infrastructure bill, with Justice 40 coming, we have so many opportunities for small businesses to get a major part of the work and the money that is coming out in terms of infrastructure support. So that is our main goal, is to make sure that these businesses are well equipped, that we are removing barriers, and that we are educating, engaging, and empowering our small businesses in Georgia to get their part of this money. Also, as my emerging leader role, I'll put that hat on, as a member of COMTO Atlanta. Shout out to all my COMTO Atlanta folks on the call. Thank y'all for joining us. I am recently elected secretary for the executive board for 2021-2023. So looking forward to serving the Atlanta industry as a member of COMTO Atlanta. So yeah, that's about it.
Hey, that's what's up. Congratulations on your recent election.
Thank you.
That's
I'm looking
really
forward
cool.
to it.
Indeed, COMTO Atlanta has a special place in my heart. That's when I became a member. I was one of the national scholarship members, so I always got love for A-Town. So that's really, really cool.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
oh yeah, so Melanie, I know you're working in Central California out in Stanislaus. It's a really exciting time with high-speed rail being built out there, like through Central Cali and different things like that. So tell us more about what you're doing out there.
Yeah, so I work in planning. So a lot of the things that we do is long-term thinking, so strategizing. But with COVID, we've kind of had to, it's been an interesting time to kind of work in the transportation industry since it's considered an essential industry. Things were kind of slowing down, but I think our work didn't slow down. If anything, it picked up. So it's there's still money coming in, a lot of projects that are happening. So I get to kind of play a small part in that. And I think the most exciting thing about my role is that I'm able to work. So I work kind of at the regional level. So it's kind of nice to be able to engage with, the cities and the county to kind of work with them to make sure that they have the resources they need from, higher up from the state, federal level, so we can get the money to stay in the region and to get those projects out and to start construction. So it's kind of exciting to be on the planning side where you kind of get to do the behind the scenes work. And then hopefully eventually in a couple of years, you actually see the impact that you're having. But personally, for me, my favorite part is just being able to work so closely with the local agencies so you can kind of really understand, what are those needs for the community. So.
And that for sure. Like, I think that at this point, like, with California, just kind of like, it's just Central California, like just that major boom that's kind of happening out there. LA, the Bay, starting to become a lot less affordable. Like, the population is creeping up. So you gotta be able to make sure that you have sustainable transportation options in the region, right? So like, it's really exciting work that you're working on. So let's jump into what really piqued your interest into a career in transportation. Like, how did y'all end up here? And Kiana, I'm gonna let you answer this first. How did you get here? Like, how did you get into transportation?
I took a long road to transportation, a long road, literally and figuratively. So I started my career in DC. I'm a native Washingtonian, born and raised. And when I started my career, I was actually doing proposal support for federal government IT projects. IT is boring. I'm sorry if you are on here and you work in IT, I'm sorry. To me, it is boring. It is, in trying to make a proposal around IT work is, I would drive home, I would ride the same highways home, and that always excited me, like watching the construction happen on the Beltway. For those of you who are from DC and know that there's always construction on the Beltway, there's always construction happening on 95 South and North. So that always excited me, seeing like the names of the firms and kind of looking them up. So I've always had an interest in transportation. When I moved to Atlanta and I drove here from DC to Atlanta, I will never do that again. And I wanted to get into transportation. That was my goal, was to get into the construction industry, specifically in transportation. And I was fortunate enough to be hired by a minority female-owned business here in Atlanta. And I was with them for 3 years, had a wonderful experience, and really got my feet wet, not only in the transportation industry, but the industry here in Atlanta. So understanding MARTA, understanding GDOT, starting to get my feet wet in those type of networks. So once I came to HNTB in 2019 and was placed on the Major Mobility Investment Program with Georgia DOT, I've really been able to kind of put my feet to the floor and get involved. And just joining COMTO was a blessing for me, because it's allowed me to kind of take my place at the table, if you will, and move forward. So that's my long and short road to transportation.
Nah, but it sounds like it was worth it, right? Like sometimes like
Absolutely.
our everyday experiences really kind of lead us to where we're supposed to be. Like when you say IT
Absolutely.
is boring, hey, some things ain't for everybody, right? I was supposed to be on ESPN, but now here I am working in transportation, right? So they are like your path finds you where you're supposed to be at. So that
Absolutely.
works out. So
Mhm.
now, Dante, man, you and I go back to Atlanta. We go back to that first conference and everything. So how did you end up here? I know like you and I ended up there, like, you know, for city, you know, you saying the intern me scholarship, but how did you end up in the industry?
Right. So what piqued my interest in the industry, it was a little bit of that. And I was also voluntold by our previously esteemed former president and CEO, Mr. A. Bradley Mims. He saw something in me and wanted to have me attend the Atlanta conference as a shadow for the internship program. And one of the things that really got me into transportation and in COMTO was that experience itself, because that was the first business conference I had ever attended. This was back in 2014. It was a different world for me. It really was. And so here's the interesting thing that happened, and it gets a little juicy. So the city internship program, at the time, I believe it was Colonel Page, who was the president and CEO, along with Burrell, who was the chief of staff. Long story short, the interns presented their internship presentation as they do during the conference, and it was not good. I was there watching as a shadow while they were presenting, but Colonel Page he wasn't having it. So he literally told them to stop the presentation, go back, do it again, and present first thing tomorrow morning. It better be great, better be correct. And so just seeing that, I was a shadow, and I still feel like he was talking to me. it was crazy. So I think all the interns were up late that night working on a project, and I was talking to some of them and got to know some, and I said, is there anything I can do to help? And I think it was at that point right there where I took that initiative, because I was a shadow. I was just seeing how everything runs. But after that speech, what the interns were supposed to do, I kind of, joined them, and assisted with the presentation. So next morning, we were up until about 3 a.m, getting ready for the presentation. We had to present, or they had to present it. It was 6 or 7 a.m. So we barely got sleep, getting stuff done. So once the presentation came along, everything was perfect. Everything was smooth. The interns, they went through and did their parts and their roles as they rehearsed. And then my portion at the end, I like to design cars, and I still kind of do to this day. But that year, I believe Julie Cunningham, who was the president and CEO at that time, she had passed. And I designed a futuristic metro bus that included all the interns, the industry partners, and a tribute to Julie Cunningham, while also embracing the future of transportation through a futuristic design bus. And the board, they were amazed. They were not expecting that. They didn't even know who I was until that happened. And then Brad was there, so he saw, okay, he has potential. So at that point, I got in contact with the board. I got in contact with Brad, and before I knew it, I was a part of the Boston conference in 2015 officially as a COMTO intern. And then that conference went so well, I returned again in 2016 as a Dallas city internship representative. So I was able to have pretty much 3 experiences as an intern with COMTO, which I think is a blessing, phenomenal, a gift, everything in itself. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this and run with it. So after the Boston conference in 2016, Brad hit me up one day. He said, Dante, I want you to come work with me in the national office. Here I am. So it really goes back to who you know rather than what you know. And I've heard that a lot growing up when I was younger, but seeing it in motion and seeing it play out the way it did specifically for me, everyone's different. but seeing it play out for me, it was amazing. It was an opportunity that I never thought I would have, considering the fact that I'm into cars, I'm working in the transportation industry. So I think that lines very well. And on top of that, I'm able to use some of my administrative work and skills that I've learned in college to help this organization thrive, such as helping you with your membership, getting you your invoice, helping you with payments and things like that, to help continue to keep this organization moving forward. So, in a nutshell, Brad, he was definitely my main mentor and kind of brought me into the fold of things. And he really showed me the way. So kudos to you, Brad. I don't know if you're watching this, but but that's pretty much my story on how I came to be part of the COMTO family. So thank you.
And if he ain't watching, we're gonna hear about it. So this is really dope, man. That is a story. Like, that is a story, man. That's what this is about, is to be able to showcase these type of stories, these type of journeys. So that way we begin to form our own seats. I saw in the chat, like somebody said, you formed your own seat at the table. You took something like in remembrance for Julie Cunningham, like the incredible Julie Cunningham. And it like led to you now working with the very organization that you've been helping out with. And I think that's really, really cool, man. So kudos to you on that. Great story. Now, Melanie, it's over to you. Like, so I know you have a very diverse background as well. So, I'm excited for you to share with everybody else. Like, how did you get into transportation?
Yeah, so I don't think there was one, there's multiple factors that kind of led me to end up in transportation. And I think I can kind of both relate to what Kiana and Dante said about, I had a general interest in transportation. I think I've always been kind of like a problem solver and like systems. So I think like just transportation, it's such a center to everything we do in life. It's how we move, it's how we move people, it's how we move things. So it's really like a centerpiece. And I think I grew up in Los Angeles too. So transportation, just traffic. And I saw a lot of issues and I was like, well, instead of complaining about it, can I do something to kind of influence that? And then, so I didn't necessarily think that transportation was the field. I was really motivated, you could say, more about environmentalism, but I think it was before my senior year in college, I heard about COMTO. So what I really wanted to do was kind of just get my foot in the door, but I didn't really know where or how or what industry. I just kind of wanted to, solve some of these issues that I was seeing. So I heard about COMTO through a colleague that who knew someone who participated in the city internship a couple years back, and he was like, well, you should apply for this program. But I was like, transportation, but I'm not, like, that's not my field. Like, what would I be doing in transportation? But I was very lucky that I think I was matched with my post-internship site for the 2019 city internship. So I did that with the Orange County Transportation Authority. And I was very lucky because I had kind of the support of not just having the internship, but having the whole COMTO experience. So being able to, that opportunity to go to the conference. So I went to, I think is the conference in Tampa in Florida. So I was able to do that and then have that extra support and be able to talk to other interns and kind of see just how diverse that transportation field is. Like, you don't necessarily need to be like what you would necessarily think transportation is. I don't know, before I used to think, oh, that's engineering or construction, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. So there's that kind of opened my eyes to kind of the possibilities that you could have in transportation. So I think from that experience, from that in city internship experience, I decided to kind of make transportation kind of my goal industry to work in. And it just happened to be that everything kind of aligned well. It was an interesting time to kind of, I graduated a little bit over a year ago, but definitely during that COVID time. So I was very lucky, I think, that my experience and the connections that I had built with the COMTO city as a city intern, that I was able to kind of stay within the industry right after graduating. So it's kind of nice to come full circle and again, give my perspective of, how COMTO helped me kind of get to where I am today.
Exactly. And thank you for sharing that. And that kind of goes back to your point and to Keanu's point about like, you just never know how you might end up in a place that you're supposed to be. Like you looking at transportation, I just always assume, oh, that's buses and trains and people just drive buses and people, but never knew that there was a whole infrastructure, planning, scheduling, ops meetings, safety, marketing, there's a whole machine behind what we do, right? And so being able to see that for what it is and figure out your niche in this is just really awesome, right? And I kind of want to touch back to a point that Dante made earlier was about mentorship. Looking at how he was able to kind of get on through COMTO with the mentorship with Mr. Mims and everything like that. And Keanu, I'm gonna kick this over to you. Like, what has been your experience like in this industry with mentorship and menteeship? Like, and how's that been important to your career progression?
Mentor and menteeship has been a huge part of my growth throughout my career, but particularly in transportation. I'm that person, I'm like a hoarder when it comes to mentors. I grab onto people, and I mean, I've been in chat rooms and COMTO events and started chatting with panelists. And I'm like, hey, can I call you? Can I meet with you? Can I pick your brain? So I've collected mentors that way. I had the opportunity to speak with Ms. Deborah Johnson out in Denver. That way, I just connected with her in the chat room and on a COMTO, I think it was a COMTO SoCal webinar. And she gave me an opportunity to pick her brain. How else would you be able to do that outside of COMTO? For those who are familiar with Helen McSwain and my mentor here in Atlanta, Malika Reed Wilkins, who is with the Atlanta Regional Commission. It's been such a great experience meeting these women and learning from them, and just building my professional network that way. So, and not just in these one-on-one conversations, but also through mentoring programs. WTS Atlanta, for example, has a mentor protege program. And I think there's some other opportunities as well, but just being able to engage with people who have gone before you, or for some folks in senior leadership who are looking for a fresher perspective, you can always go back and find a younger person and be like, hey, do you want to be my mentor? Mentorship works up and down. And that's something that I'm also learning being a part of our intern program here at the HNTV Atlanta office. We just finished our summer intern program for our 2021 cohort. And I've learned so much from our interns this summer that I am going to use to implement in future projects. So to me, it's a 360, it's a 360 relationship when it comes to mentors and mentees.
I 100% agree. And shout out to Deborah Johnson, by the way. She was my first mentor in the industry as well. So you're right, though. It's not just about what you receive from mentorship, but how do you disperse that back out, right? How do you, because like once you get that good mentor, you hold on to them on their coattails, like I'm going wherever you go, right?
Exactly.
But it's not just about what is it about what this person can do for me, right? And I think that's what people, I think that's something that folks should understand, is that it's not just about, receiving, it's about giving as well. And so exactly. And kicking it over to you, Dante, like you said, like you had a heavy hitter, like as one of your mentors, right? So what does it look like for you? Like, what does mentorship now look like for you, at this point in your career?
Thank you, JR. And Kiana, great point. I definitely second that. I think what a lot of people have to understand is the beauty about mentorship is that you don't even realize you have a mentor until you're already on your path to success. In other words, you don't even have to call them your mentor, you just gravitate towards them. There are certain people that you just gravitate towards based on how they make you feel about what you want to do. You know what I mean? So I think, with Brad, it was definitely that, he was definitely the main mentor in my life, professionalism, punctuality, being on time, presentation, image, everything, you know. And the other beautiful thing about mentorship is the fact that, and I actually came across it during another webinar that COMTO had. I can't remember, but for that mentorship, you have people that are older than you. They're in certain positions, CEO suites, you know, managers, what have you, and they don't even know that you're looking up to them. And I say that to say that you have people that are older than you that are mentors that don't even know they're a mentor to you because you're just watching everyone. I'll give you a prime example. Even though Brad has been a mentor to me, as well as Tara McDaniel, actually, both of them have been a mentor to me. But for example, the board, I don't get to talk to the board as often, but just seeing how they carry themselves, how they operate, how they run their meetings, that's mentorship. Even though they don't say anything directly to you or give you tidbits, you just watch and see what they do. That in itself is mentorship. And I think that is also very important for people to understand. Like there's mentorship where you have a personal connection with someone, and there's mentorships where you can actually see what people are doing around you that affects you positively in a professional manner, you know? And as being as a mentoree, I think I said it right, mentoree, mentee, mentee.
But no, you just have a new word. It would be good with that. We're gonna roll with that.
But as a mentee, I think I have touched a lot of our previous interns because and me working in the national office, I was also assisting Mariah with the city internship program. And anything that the interns are going through, any troubles, problems, concerns, you know, I was there to be able to talk to them about, because I literally was in that position, you know, a year before them or 2 years before them. So I had that experience and I had that knowledge, you know, to kind of get them on a good foot and get them looking on the right track on what they want to do in life with regard to transportation, you know. So I think mentorship and being a mentor is very important, because when someone brings you up, you reach back and you bring someone with you, you know what I mean? And I think Kiana mentioned that earlier. So I think that is very important and key to growing or merging leaders. And I'll just end it at that.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one more point too. We often look at mentorship as as looking at people older than us. We can also look at each other as peer mentors as well. I think that's one area that we don't always think about. You know, we have a great circle of people who are our age, who we encourage and they encourage us. So I think that's another great way to keep that mentor relationship going. I have a great relationship with my boss, who is also in my age, Emmanuel Murtha, who's doing fantastic things at HNTB and in Atlanta. So I definitely look up to her. So just to kind of piggyback on what you said, Dante.
And thank you for making that point, Kiana. And Melanie, come on, get in here too. Like, what does it look like for you? Like, what does mentorship look like for you?
Yeah, so I think mine's a little different. I don't think I've had one specific mentor that I've kind of looked at. I think it's more kind of evolved as I've transitioned kind of from that academic career to being an intern to now transitioning to full-time and hitting those early milestones of now 1 year into the industry, furthering that. So I think like who I've looked up to and who I've kind of asked for advice has kind of like shifted as I've moved along in my career. And I think sometimes it's difficult to kind of get that time with people that are maybe in more senior positions, but I've kind of found it very useful to kind of have that discussion and those discussions and build that relationship, maybe with someone that you see yourself maybe being in 2 to 5 years, that position, and kind of see like, have those discussions of how did you get to the point that you're at right now? You know, that's kind of what I would see myself. So, and sometimes it's easier to have find time with that kind of level. So I think for me, it's been a little bit different of not necessarily having one mentor, but like multiple people in my career that kind of have had an impact or have kind of taught me something that I've carried with me as I move forward. So I think it's just kind of like a matter of adjusting as you progress. And I think also like I've encountered people that, you know, just having that are willing to have that conversation has kind of taught me to kind of keep my door open as I move forward. Because now I'm in a position where like, now people are reaching out to me to ask for advice. So it's kind of interesting to be in that position. And I'm like, people had the door open when I was asking questions. So I will tried my best to keep my door open to be that person that I was looking for advice like 2 years ago. So I think that's kind of my experience been with mentorship.
That's key. Like, it's also about like, I think one thing about mentorship is that we always try to like aim for like the highest position possible. It's like, oh yeah, let me get the CEO of MetroLink to like, be my mentor. But sometimes you got to mentor, like, you got to network and mentor across as well too. Or even just like you said, somebody that maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of you. Because like that way it gives you more insight to see what pitfalls they went through and the ones that you can avoid. And therefore somebody behind you can do the same thing. Right. So it's very, very, very key. You can definitely like just like Melanie said, like you pull value from like many different mentors. It's never just one person. And that all comes down to networking. And that kind of lays like the foundation of laying that seat to the table, right? So that kind of leads us to our next question. And this is going to be like a longer question because I know we only got like a little less than 10 minutes on our discussion. So we want to get to all of our beautiful guest questions and everything. But so what does or what can the transportation industry do to further support us as young professionals in our quest of like having a seat at the table, right? You all have been or in industry, right? So what more can industry do to support those quests? And do you feel like they are doing enough? And if not, what more can be done? And I'm gonna kick that over to Dante Toledo.
Excuse me. Awesome. Okay, so it's a good question. So it took me some time to think about. I think that what the industry is currently doing is fine, but of course, there's always room for improvement. I think that what the industry should continue to do and probably elaborate more on are opportunities, but more importantly, marketing to younger people. We tend to have, I don't want to say old, but a more elder audience within the transportation industry that are running things, and as emerging leaders, the transportation industry should do its best to elaborate the marketing that's geared towards targeting young professionals. And another key thing is that they should teach it in school. I think transportation is something very important that should be taught in school. I mean, you take the bus to school, you drive to school, so I think teaching that at a younger age will get students who will be interested in transportation more engaged at an early age, so that they're not finding out later on down the road, like, oh, there's an entire system behind a metro bus, like, oh, there's construction, it's things like that. So just getting them while they're young. And the transportation industry needs to hit and market our young folks while they're young. So when they get into that role, when they get into that environment, they already know what to expect. So that's what I have to say to answer to that question.
No, that's a great question. Teach the youngest who Gary A. Morgan is. Like that's really true. Like teach what transportation infrastructure looks like. We have a whole bill that just got passed in the Senate this morning. Are we teaching our youngest about that, right? So understanding. I'm thinking that, kind of moving forward, that's really key. But like I kind of want to shift that over to Kiana. Like, what is your thoughts on that? Like what more can industry do if they're not already doing it enough to provide seats or help on the quest for seats at the table?
Definitely agree with Dante. And one of the things that we're doing here at HNTB Atlanta office is engaging in our social responsibility. So one of the initiatives that we're looking at doing is engaging one of the school clusters here from elementary through middle school through high school to get them interested in the industry now. As Dante said, the majority of the folks who are in this industry are much more seasoned than we are. And, as they begin to look at their next transitional cycles and moving out of this industry and into their retired lives, there are going to be huge voids that are left with knowledge transfer, the lack of knowledge transfer, and even the lack of understanding. While technology is great, there are some things that technology cannot replace. And so, being able to pass that information, I think, is key. Another thing I think the transportation industry can do as individuals is to not only be a mentor, but be a sponsor for folks. particularly for young professionals. So when that person is not in front of you, you can still speak about them in rooms where things count. I think those are the two top things that the industry can do to continue bringing young professionals to the table.
Agreed. And I mean, everybody been dropping jewels, but Kiana, you coming with it, especially about knowledge transfer, right? Just being able to understand like a lot of the knowledge that's been accrued over time will probably go with the folks who are like transitioning out. So how can we best set up like standing infrastructure to make that knowledge transfer a lot easier? Like to really kind of, again, it kind of goes back to lifting as you climb, right? And so, and Melanie, what are your thoughts on like what more can industry do at providing or helping on the quest for seats at the table?
I think I agreed with everything that Kiana and Dante said. I think communication, having those discussions and kind of making it accessible to have those discussions. Again, being able to kind of pass on those lessons learned from years of being in the industry to those younger professionals so we can carry those lessons and not have to reinvent the wheel. So kind of just keeping that door open, but I think also kind of adapting or being open and flexible. And I think I've experienced that in, at least personally in my career. I've noticed that there's a more of a willingness to adapt and to kind of redefine some of the ways that things used to be done, especially with COVID. I think it kind of changed the way that we work and the way that we interact. So I think that's also very attractive to younger professionals. So I think like keeping that in mind, and I know I feel like there's always need for a larger workforce in the transportation industry. And sometimes you could say it might be a little difficult to kind of build that pipeline. And I think it's not that there's not interest or people willing and able to do that kind of work. It's just maybe a lack of like knowledge that those opportunities are out there. So I think like to kind of inspire that next kind of generation of young transportation professionals, just like it was said before, kind of making it known that these opportunities are out there and just what kind of pathways there are to get there. And I think that's probably the best thing that you can do.
I 100% agree with that. I think that you guys have all given like really, really great answers to these questions. And this is why you guys were selected to be on this panel, because you guys are all dope. Like you guys like have like this really great vision of what it means to be a young professional in this industry. And, it's really, really, really cool to like see you all and learn more about you all. And this is kind of where we transition to Q&A so we can learn even more about y'all. And this is where we put the power into our participants' hands, right? So I'm seeing some questions like coming up now. So I guess, Guatiri, we can get started with the Q&A right now, right?
Sure, it's been a great discussion. We have a few questions in the Q&A box. I'd like to remind everyone, if you have any questions for our panelists, please enter them in the Q&A box. And I'll begin with our first question from Cyril Weems. Why should the leadership of firms and organizations in the transportation industry invite young professionals to have a seat at the table? What uniqueness do you bring to the table to support the success of the firms and the transportation industry as a whole? You all are clearly superstars.
I'll take that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you want to take it, Kiana?
We'll tag
okay,
team.
well, yeah, we'll tag.
We'll tag team it.
So, real, thank you for your question. My answer to that, why should young professionals have a seat at the table? We kind of sort of answered that, but I'll elaborate even more. Not only bring diversity, but bring difference, bring creativity, bring change. There it is, change. That's what we bring change to make it more accessible to our young professionals, make it more accessible to everyone, bring ideas to the table that can help market our industries and our partners, to really reach out and get those people in the communities. I think it's very important to include young professionals at the seat of the table because they'll eventually will be looking for young professionals to include at the seat of the table. So it kind of, it's almost like a full circle. Someone brings you up to the table, you're at the table, then you bring someone to the table to take your place. So I think it's very important to keep that ball continuously rolling, just how COMTO continues to move the nation. We can't stop. We got to keep progressing. There's always room for improvement. And I will tag team it to Kiana.
But Dante, you kind of said what I was going to say, but one thing that I did want to add is that young professionals bring in a new innovation to current ideas. So, you know, a lot of ideas are pretty standard. You know, we engage one way, we do business development one way. There are other ways that we can do those things. And I think that particularly with social media, with the virtual environment, we've all been introduced to this new virtual environment with COVID. And like Melanie said, young professionals are super comfortable in this space because they grew up in it. So understanding and being able to communicate, engage, network in this virtual space has been key for the last 18 months. And I think we've seen young professionals kind of take it and run. So I think that's one of the main values that they bring. I mean, there will always be a need for a young professional. You know, one day we will be that senior leadership and there will be professionals behind us and professionals behind them. And, you know, one point that I wrote down because I wanted to make sure I said it was that there will always be a need for talent because people will always be moving. This industry will never stop. It will never stop. There will never be an end to the transportation industry because we've gone from horse and buggies to Model T cars to buses, and now this industry is multimodal. You know, we're everywhere, and we have to make sure that this industry continues to expand and grow. And as it expands and grows, our young talent workforce will expand and grow as well. I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
I was gonna contribute a little bit there, kind of wrap up that question, build on what Kiana said about the industry constantly evolving. I think it's a very interesting industry because a lot of, like, from a planning perspective, a lot of the things that we're working on, like, they're 20, 40 years in advance. So really who you're planning and who you're building for is for that next generation. So I think it's important to kind of include that dialogue, even though maybe it won't even be us, it'll be the next, even whoever comes after us that is going to be living and using this transportation network we're building right now. So I think it's important to kind of bring all those voices in and include them in that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's real talk from all three of y'all, especially Kiana just dropped a bar. Like, there will always be a need for talent because this industry won't stop moving. And Melanie with saying, like, there's always going to be a need for diverse thoughts. Like, that's just what it's going to be. And I really think that all of you guys are superstars in this. And you guys are going to contribute, like, to building those systems for future generations, right? I'm saying y'all, like, I'm not including that. I am too. But still, you know, like, the focus is on you guys. But yeah, let's kick it over to the next question.
Okay. I'm going to jump around a little bit, and I know we're running out of time, so try to keep your answers as brief as possible. I know you guys have a lot to share, but I want to get as many questions answered. So our next question I'm going to jump to is Philip Haley, who asks, as a mid-level manager in a transit agency, we often hire interns to come work with us. What is one significant thing we can do to foster their growth in transportation?
I would say cultivate their passion. That's the one thing that I would say. If there's something that they have expressed a clear interest in during their time, their internship time, cultivate it. That's how you get them not only to stay engaged, but to come back.
I agree with Kiana. I also second that motion, but definitely foster their interests, but not only foster their interests, but give them someone with that same interest who is doing what they want to do, because it goes both ways. Foster their interest with someone who's also doing what they want to do. So I'll just add that to that as well.
And I would say that the options open, kind of, I think what helped me was that I was exposed to different pathways. So maybe you go into the internship thinking, this is what I want to do, or maybe you have no idea really what you want to do. But if you understand the different departments that happen, what actually makes a transit agency work, you might not think that that's actually a role that someone's playing. Like, someone with a biology is working in transportation, how does that work in there? So I think just keeping kind of showing, giving them a little taste of everything that your agency does.
Mhm.
Okay, so our next question is from Anonymous. It said, what should the more matured professionals do to create a more inclusive and equitable environment for our young professionals to thrive?
Simple, set the example. I mean, you never know who's looking at you, whether it be a young professional or a C-suite. You just never know who's watching. And and I think that's one of the main things I've learned from being not just in the transportation industry, but in life. You never know who's watching. So you want to make sure you have your best foot forward, your image is right, because you just never know who's watching, who's going to approach you with that opportunity. So.
And I would also say, as a senior leader, go and talk to an intern, go and talk to a young professional. Ask them, what are they looking for? What can we do better?
All right, so I'm going to do 2 more questions. I'm sorry I can't get to all of them, but this next one comes from Joanna Helmstetter. What are some of your ideas as to how we can market the transportation industry to younger people besides internships?
I think it should start like before you get to that internship level, maybe like even in schools when you're I think it's really all about just kind of more marketing, but kind of just explaining, transportation's an industry and this is everything you can kind of do. I think like getting that idea out at an earlier age to see that that's a, pathway could really help build that pipeline from the beginning. Because I think once you get to that internship point, maybe that's just to kind of, get more experience, but kind of building that passion beforehand. So I think like maybe having those discussions with even a younger audience to kind of show and tell what transportation does. Did you know that this is what keeps you moving? This is what keeps, your grocery stores stocked, kind of connecting those dots at an early age, I think is really what is going to like continue that steady interest and value in transportation.
And I think one additional point, that was a great point, Melanie. Introduce students to the technical work. Not everyone is meant to be on the professional side as an engineer. There are inspectors, there are estimators, there are folks who are doing the day-to-day work, and all of that is a part of transportation. Understand that those are career pathways as well, and technical education is a key part of keeping this industry going.
And I'll just quickly add, I know we're running out of time, but for the industries in the transportation industry, visit your local elementary schools, visit your local middle schools, visit your local high schools, coordinate a presentation, or as Melanie said, like a show and tell, just show up to the school and just show the students there what you all do and how it's going to impact them, whether they work with you all or they're riding the transit systems. I just think just getting that bug in their ear at such an early age is important, because that's when they're going to absorb all the information the most. So, that's what I'll add to that.
All right. For our final question, so I'll give our final question, and then after they answer, JR, you can do your closing. So the final question comes from COMTO Columbus. You all are very bright people and the sky is the limit for you. Where do you see yourselves in the next 3 to 5 years?
Dante, you can go first.
All this time now you want to be
right. Thank you for the question, Daturi and Mr. COMTO Columbus, Quincy. But that is a really good question. And that kind of goes back to when people will say, well, where do you see yourself in such and such years? You know what? My answer to that is in the transportation industry. Will I be with COMTO? I don't know. But what I have learned is to take what you have, take the resources that you currently have, run with them and go with it. You can't control You can, but ultimately you can't control what happens on the outside, but you can control what you have control of, which is controlling of your future, control of your path, control of what you want to do. I love this organization. It's hard work, but it's good hard work. It's healthy hard work. And I see the benefits of how it's impacting our members and industries that we work with. So I think that's very important. I think that's very important. Knowing your path.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, I still see myself in the transportation industry. And I think I kind of see myself, again, I not necessarily in a specific position, but I think just a position where I can kind of continue doing with what motivates me and what kind of keeps me going. Again, like Dante said, sometimes it's hard work, but I think what kind of keeps you going is that internal motivation to kind of see that you're having an impact, at least personally for me, in the community, and kind of seeing that, you know, you're helping the community meet those transportation needs. So I think like I would want to continue to be in a position where I can kind of influence that, you know, kind of behind the scenes work, and just have that, be able to continue to have that contact and that ongoing communication with the community, I think is really what drives me. And I think transportation is an industry that has such an impact in the community that it's like the best way personally I see myself to make an impact. So hopefully continuing that influence.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with my co-panelists. Definitely continuing to further the transportation industry here in Georgia. Hopefully still engaging with small businesses and making sure that we're continuing to grow the industry in Georgia from the inside out. And also still engage with COMTO, continue to grow our COMTO Atlanta chapter, and also showing young people the advantage and the benefits of being a member of COMTO.
You know what? I am speechless right now of how well this conversation is going. I just want to thank all three of y'all for giving amazing responses to these questions. And we, collectively as Emerging Leaders Subcommittee, we want to thank you all for, for spending an hour of your day to hear us talk about something that's very important. It's like, how do we future-proof the transportation industry? How do we create those seats at the table? I just want to personally thank the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee. I want to thank my Tier 1 team for putting this all together. We wouldn't have done this without the guidance of Aisha and Cyril, our co-chairs of this amazing subcommittee here. I keep saying because I'm trying to gather up my thoughts. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. But it's been a great time. This has been a great discussion. Kiana, Melanie, Dante, you guys are rising. When I say rising stars, I don't say that lightly. You guys are gonna really make moves in this industry, and I can't wait to continue to watch y'all success and to continue to help y'all out as much as I can. Also want to continue to thank our industry partners for the continued support of not only Emerging Leaders but COMTO as a whole. And I'm gonna kick it over to Kateri for our closing remarks.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was a great presentation. Thank you, JR. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee team and their leadership. I want to thank everyone in attendance and all the support and love you showed to our panelists in the chat. And also thank you for your Q&A and your questions. We tried to get to as many as possible, but I think we had a really robust conversation with these four group of people. And before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to two members of our audience. We have our interim president and CEO, Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd, in attendance, as well as our new board chair, Tanya Adams, in attendance. I want to thank them for joining us, as well as everyone else. So upcoming events with COMTO. Later on this week, we're talking about emerging leaders. We're going to celebrate some emerging leaders by holding our virtual National Scholarship Ceremony. We have, I think, over 20 national scholars that we're going to be awarding monies to. So please join us on Thursday, August 12th. We have a very nice ceremony prepared. And then in September 28th through the 30th, we have our 50th anniversary virtual National Meeting and Training Conference. So we're having a conference. We're going to do it virtually. It's going to be, I think, about 3 days worth of content. We have 15 CEU workshops. We have 5 plenary sessions. We have 2 award ceremonies. We have networking events. We have an exhibit. So please register today. You can go to comtonational.org to receive that information. You can also go to comtonational.org to find out about becoming a member. And when you become a member, you can even sign up to join a committee like the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee or any one of our national committees. So once again, we have our events calendar, we have information about membership, and once again, we have information on how to register for the national conference. And with that, I will say good afternoon and thank you again for joining us once again, and we will be closing out the Zoom. Have a great afternoon.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.